Hello and welcome to Narrative Live. It's good to have Christopher Armitage back with us. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm fantastic. How about yourself?
I'm fantastic too, having conquered all these technical issues, or maybe haven't conquered them. Look, we're live. You can see us live.
Now. Through the fire of technology, we have been united.
I know. I'm very excited about that. Are we actually streaming on your site? Do you know if we are? Because I can see us on my site, but...
It says Shalev is now live on my Substack. So
that is exciting.
Telling me, then that's got to be a good sign.
That's really, and what's interesting is you're like highly ranked. What category are you in? You're in the world news category, American politics category. People love you, Christopher. Every time I mention your name, every time I post anything about you, firstly, the women go crazy, but also everybody goes crazy because everyone's got you've got a huge fan club, mostly because of the work you're doing. It's been incredibly detailed, incredibly smart, and also very strategic. And how does that make you feel, knowing that you have all these fans?
Relief. I spent 4 months after the election crying and getting upset at people for even mentioning politics to me. And I made it through that, and I processed, and I just started writing. And I wrote about, some of us were the type of people who we want to learn when we're upset and something's causing us pain, and we want to understand it because then we can do something about it, anything, even if that anything is just influencing the world to be a little bit better. And so my writing came from that, and all of a sudden this community formed of people who were feeling the exact same way. And I think that's really what makes my audience different from most journalists or activists, is it's just I'm processing this whole situation publicly, and now we're all doing this with 55,000 members.
It's like a primal scream almost. The way you describe it. That it's and that's why I think it means so much to people, the work you're doing, because it seems so authentic. It is authentic, and it really comes from the heart. And I think that's the way a lot of people feel about the crisis America is in right now. And, we don't really call it a crisis. We don't think of it as a crisis necessarily, although I certainly do every day. But this is an existential crisis, as your newsletter is named. We are in a very difficult spot in America right now, and we have a lot of work to do to get out of it. And the work you've been doing has been particularly around the Supreme Court and their justices and the corruption of the justices on the Supreme Court. We're going to get into some more details about that, but talk to me a little bit about why you called it the Existential Republic. Am I saying it correctly? I always get it a little bit wrong.
Existentialist, but that's
Existentialist Republic. Sorry, I will get it right next time. I promise.
I had a call with someone who had a lot of money. I didn't really know anything about him, but he said, do you know who I am or whatever on the call? And I said, I don't know, but you must be important if I'm on this call, I guess. And then he was like, you need to change the title of your publication. Stop being mean about rich people. We hate fascism too. And I was like, all right, buddy.
But are you being mean to rich people? I mean, I don't have any sympathy for that.
Only if they whine. Oh, that's my problem. Yeah. If they whine. But I think that, the existentialism has been part of my journey through this philosophically. Something I try to remember. I mean, cognitive behavioral therapy, philosophy, these are therapeutic tools for me. And they're the lens that I view politics, activism, organizational strategy, public policy. They all go through that same lens. And so while I don't get the opportunity to talk about people like Albert Camus or, Jean-Paul Sartre, that often they're important for me. And I'm here, I'm having fun as much as I can, because I when I look at my heroes, people who are especially in the existentialism world, and one of my biggest heroes, being Camus, they were fighting fascism, they were living their lives, and the fact is, even in the darkest days of humanity, you have the thrownness of you are where you are. You were born into the life you were born, but my heroes were fighting fascism, and we are in this moment right now that calls so much of us. And do people deserve it? Do good people deserve all this suffering that's come to them? No, but to be human is to suffer, and the journey of trying to pay attention to where you shine the spotlight of your consciousness and what you choose to do with this little flame of life that you're given. That is, it's a gift and a curse. and it informs everything that I do. And it's that holistic view of activism, world changing influence, and ourselves, our mission, our missions in life, our purposes, the creation, being meaning doesn't exist before essence. It doesn't precede essence. But my life is given so much meaning by I'm talking to people every single day. I sit down with state house representatives. I talk to, people in indivisible groups, and we're trying to make the world a better place. What else could you do with your life? I'm loving it,
Absolutely. I love that. Very inspiring. And it also speaks to sort of the, what do they call it? The creative destruction, or I think is a term that they use. It happens at times of war and happens at times of great suffering. Is often, humanity achieves its greatness, finds its greatness. And in many ways, the work you're doing and other people here on Substack are doing and elsewhere in fighting this rise of fascism in America is just the same as we've, of all our heroes in the past. I've saw growing up in South Africa, the likes of Nelson Mandela, who, fought a horrific police state there and won through the most incredible principles. You can't help but admire that kind of courage and that kind of presence in the face of adversity that people like Mandela had.
Yeah, well, we're never going to win. The fascists, the authoritarians want us to be crushed, helpless, in pain. The most dangerous sort of opposition is the opposition that is enthused and filled with energy through their mission, through their purpose. And even if you told me that we know for a fact we will fail, the bad guys will win. Ending of 1984, the boot on the face forever, that's where we're headed. I'm still here for it, because there's nothing else I want to do with my life.
And what else are you going to do, right? You have to do what you got to do. But also, we're not going to end there. It's not going to end there. We know it's not going to end there.
We can win. We totally can. Absolutely. I feel like it's important to make peace with. It's not about the outcome. Yeah. It's this is going to be kind of a Jim Bro thing, but when you're lifting weights, you do it because it's the daily practice. That's what it is, and your outcome is what results from that daily practice. I love being alive. I love humanity. I love, the great things that humans can do. And when you're in love, it's not about the big dramatic gestures. It's about showing up every day as best you can.
I love that. We should lift weights sometime. That'll be interesting to see. It would be very funny, actually. I'm sure you'd be far stronger than I am on most things. But let's talk about what's going on in your Substack right now, because there are two great pieces that came out. One was about there's a lot of people who have the Epstein files. There's a lot of people who could be acting right now on the Epstein files and doing something about it. And they're not doing something about it because they haven't published it. They haven't leaked any of it. They haven't come out with any of this commentary. And it's sort of an indicator, I think, from your perspective, that the Department of Justice is just not the Department of Justice anymore, that we have gone down many, many rungs of the ladder into fascism, and we really are no longer have this idea of justice. I think I saw an article earlier on today where, other than Eugene Carroll getting prosecuted, Obama is about to get indicted as part of a grand jury, and more to come. It's now just the president's sort of wish list. But tell us a little bit more about your concern around justice in America today.
Absolutely. Well, and before I even dig into the state of criminal justice at the federal level, I want to mention that there are who has it worse than high-profile political opponents of the regime in power? It's whistleblowers. Historically, nobody has it worse than whistleblowers. A lot of times they're the only ones who end up going to jail for the crimes that they're reporting. If you want whistleblowers on the Epstein files, you better create some real good protections for them at the state level or something like that, because right now we see what happens to them.
Yeah.
It's not good things. At the federal level, we are at the end stage. We're past the finish line for Project 2025's federal criminal justice goals. The goals were, first, to purge the majority of the staff. In certain ethics offices, you saw 7 out of 10 attorneys gone within the first 6 months of the administration. So you purge as many employees as you can. You institute loyalty tests to get rid of any that are left. And then the final stage that we have now passed, and we've been within for the last year, is the complicity stage. So those attorneys, we're talking about hundreds of employees at the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, are complicit in partisan criminal activity. You don't have to take my word for it. Who do you think was redacting the names of Donald Trump's friends? Who do you think is going after Letitia James? Who's going after Barack Obama and James Comey? Who's going after journalists? That is the complicity stage.
Yeah, people on the inside are really saying that's what it looks like now, that they can't believe how people who used to be principled, people who used to have, the ideals of the Justice Department on top of everything they did every day, have just realized that the only way to survive, the only way to keep the pension is to just give in. Just give in.
We saw it very clear. We did so much research after World War II. Thousands of interviews with people who helped the Nazi regime do what they were doing. And what shocked a lot of these researchers was that the people they were interviewing were just like them. They were just like, I didn't want to get fired, and I figured I was, a few stages removed, and all of my coworkers were doing it. So the fact is, people follow unlawful orders. In all of human history, especially if you can get them to do something wrong through, I once upon a time was a law enforcement officer, and one of the things they teach you is the cycle of compliance. So let's say you're a corrections officer and you have an inmate who's just, it's a murderer, and they've done, they're angry about something. You do a couple things. One, you remove them from their emotional anchor. So their physical location actually has an emotional grounding for them. So you say, hey, can we talk over here? I know you're upset. Can we talk over here? Now, what you do when you move them from that first location to the second, you ask them to do something really small, is you start the cycle of compliance. And cult leaders do this too. And magicians. They start you getting used to saying yes. So now you've walked over here. Now they say, would you sit down in this chair? Now, let me tell you, the CIA, FBI, all sorts of intelligence agencies, they've done in-depth research on just how far the cycle of compliance can go. And we're talking getting people, if you work that cycle well enough, to commit murders or to commit human rights abuses. And so we are living through the institutional version where someone who might be a lot like you and me, or the people watching this, they've just been doing their job their whole career, and all of a sudden they find themselves, they'll justify it. The easiest
they justify it, but I don't know if I would. I've actually been in those situations. People have asked me to do things and I haven't done them, and I think there are people in this world that don't fall into that trap. But you sort of have to have very little to lose, because if you're worried about your kids, if you're worried about your mortgage, if you're worried about all these things that you got to do in life, you might be willing to sacrifice your morals, your ethics, your some of this, because you just want to pay the mortgage, make sure your kids can have a college education and aren't sidelined by society.
Yeah, I think the road to tyranny is paved with rational decisions. Completely rational decisions that ultimately lead to our demise. And I agree with you, by the way, that plenty of us, how you make sure that you're the person who doesn't comply in those situations? You can actually guarantee it with 100% certainty. You just think about it in advance.
Yeah.
That's why we give our military members all these briefings about not following unlawful orders. And, as someone who's been a first responder, they tell you to think through the scenarios in your head and think about how you want to react. And so if you work for the federal government, great message for you, actually. What's your red line? Or even if you're a governor or anybody, what's your line in the sand that if they ask me to do X, Y, or Z, what am I going to do in that moment? And it's harder decisions, because there are a lot of people in the government right now who are choosing to do the wrong thing for plenty rational and good reasons. But those are the reasons that lead to our destruction, our existential death.
Now, it's interesting to watch the DOJ sort of become this rubber stamp for whatever the president wants. But the judiciary is not, mostly. I mean, mostly the courts in this land have held up pretty well, I think, in this torrent of stuff that's come out of the White House and elsewhere, but not the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is sort of all the places you'd want there to be sort of rational, ethical morality and all those other things. You've been uncovering in your incredible work at your Substack that things are not good in that in SCOTUS land. Every one of these justices seems to be, not everyone, many of them are compromised quite severely. And you've done incredible research. We went through this with John Roberts the last time. And tonight, I really want to hear your thoughts about Clarence Thomas, because there is so much corruption swirling in Clarence Thomas's history that it's mind-boggling that this man remains on the courts at all.
Yeah. He's Clarence Thomas. The Roberts Court has created another end stage for us of judicial capture and corruption at the federal level. And it's someone like Justice Thomas has been buoyed. I think that's part of why he's so confident being openly partisan now, is because these people feel like nobody can do anything about what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And if you're following the old structure, then that is how it is. Yeah, there was a deferment. People like Clarence Thomas, who, under state statutes has committed tax fraud, could be wrapped up in RICO charges. Let me ask you, if there's a judge in Virginia and he's getting taken out all the time on lavish trips by people who regularly appear before his court, that's corruption, right? 100%. I love common sense. Right? Yeah.
Corruption. It's total corruption.
Exactly.
And in this case, Clarence Thomas has been taken off on more than just the one lavish trip. He's got like decades of history of flying private jets and sailing on yachts and going to luxury vacations. And
they bought his mom a house. They sent one of his kids to college. They bought him over an RV worth over $100,000. That was one that got a lot of attention. It's
billionaires that he wouldn't necessarily be hanging out with on a regular basis if he wasn't a justice in the Supreme Court, I don't think. But here he is being celebrated as this, as lifelong friends of all these guys who are, by the way, sometimes very racist and anti-Semitic and all these other things, but it seems to be okay for the good justice and his wife. Now, you've just said something there that, if you're an ordinary judge, you'd be put up in front of another judge and you'd be, probably go to jail for what? For tax fraud? Or
it has happened. Tax fraud, I think, RICO charges, organized crime. Trump didn't invent this playbook. It's just the organized crime playbook. He's a New Jersey, New York guy. He was in Atlantic City. He was the guy who just would take money from anybody, and the mob loved that. And so these are tried and true tactics. It's just what happened was, if you leave the New Jersey, New York, Virginia court system, the judges that are in your pocket, suddenly they're on the Supreme Court. And apparently we have a much lower bar for the conduct. Now, but John Roberts has interpreted the law increasingly narrowly so that it is very easy to avoid fraud or corruption or bribery statutes at the federal level. Now, they could pass different laws, but here's the thing. States have their own laws too. Mm-hmm. And when the Department of Justice came out of and the AG's Justice Department, and AGs, they largely were created to deal with places in the United States where, because of the KKK and racism, they were having trouble handling criminal justice in those areas fairly. So the federal government said, we're going to step in and we're going to fill that need because you're just not doing your jobs there. And now we need to move that in the other direction. And our founders were really brilliant to create an additional check on power, because not only do we have the legislature and the judicial branch and the executive branch at the federal level, but we have thousands of other governments within our government. It's dual sovereigns. That doctrine has been affirmed over and over again and throughout U.S. history, and as recently as 2019 in the Snyder decision. And it says states are allowed to enforce their own laws. Now, if I say that the state of Virginia should start pursuing fraud, organized crime, bribery, corruption charges on Justice Thomas because there's sufficient evidence in the public domain, people start to say, well, I don't know, that's are they allowed to do that? Do they have to, but
that's true. I mean, you wouldn't expect them to. You'd expect the Supreme Court to be governed by only federal laws, and why would the states be able to do that? Except they're just people.
They're just people. And if Justice Thomas got a DUI in Virginia, would you call the FBI or the Department of Justice? No, you'd call the sheriff. Obviously, that's who would handle the whole thing. Now, you will not find if I had $1 million, I'd offer somebody $1 million if they could find the statute or the ruling by the Supreme Court or the constitutional amendment that exists somewhere that says that the laws get applied differently based on who your employer is, or that we have to defer to the federal government. Dual sovereignty doctrine. These states have their own laws, and if I say he got a DUI, nobody questions the state can go after him. And the only reason we're treating corruption differently is just because, they want it to be a rich person crime. They want it to be a powerful person crime. They want to be able to drag it out for years.
Well, because it's also endemic. I mean, the problem is there's so much corruption all the way to the very top of the American power system that everyone is so corrupt. Chances of you actually getting, whatever you're expecting through is very limited. In fact, what you may get is $1.8 billion being spent on January the 6th, insurrectionists for doing criminal activity. They get rewarded now for the criminal activity and the corruption. So why would anyone do anything about it if that's what the system is that they've set up?
Well, it's all carrots and sticks.
Mm-hmm.
It's all incentives and disincentives. And right now, everybody who stood up to Trump, it didn't stop him from getting reelected.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody who helped him do bad things, he got them out of trouble and is now getting them rewards. I mean, I don't think he's smart, but I do think that there's an intuitive understanding of give good things to the people who do what I want and hurt the people who do what I don't want. And that has succeeded for 11 years in such a dramatic way. We lost our democracy as it existed as soon as he regained power, and now he's able to weaponize the system. Why would any AG, you'd have to be crazy, but we need that. We need some crazy. We need
to make you wonder. Sorry to interrupt you, but do the Democrats offer an alternative that is incentivizing their supporters, or are we just saying the Democrats are saying, well, we're going to return to something that was what we had before, kind of similar. We don't have a counter incentive plan to the GOP.
Yeah, and those are the questions we need to be asking, right? Is how do we, because humans are just all, we're biological beings. We're moving away from the things that hurt us and towards the things that like us. And I talk about that with law enforcement reform a lot too. Is like, if you want better cops, you need to create a better system for policing and how we manage expectations, incentives, and disincentives for officers. And it's the same with our politicians. The Democrats don't have a unified plan. I've had people come to me and ask me to do, some Project 2026 for, Democrat style, that kind of thing. And the problem is the Democratic Party has an abysmal approval rating. The Democratic Party has a lower approval rating than Donald Trump right now.
So. Yeah. The Democratic Party is, I think, actually quite hated by everybody because they're not really of being effective opposition. And yet, is it them? Is it the system that's muzzling them? Is it the system that's breaking them down? Or is there something there that they should be doing differently, because it's not really breaking through? I don't think they're, and I'm worried about November, not because it's going to be rigged. Of course they're going to rig it. Of course they're going to get, only some people are going to get their ballots. Of course it's going to be difficult to get access to voting stations, but it's also, there's going to be kind of a demotivated electorate out there who's not going to be sure the Democrats can pull it off, even if they won.
Yeah, well, they can't. I'm going to call it right now. I think in the work that we do, predictions are a bad idea, but I'm going to make a prediction.
Careful, I'm recording this.
No, bring it. I'm here for it. Bring it. I want it.
Give me your prediction.
We will, and this is part of existentialism, okay? We're going to be disappointed. Yeah, we are. That's okay. Every single Republican state, just to look at the situation honestly, and if I'm wrong, I love being wrong, okay? But I think that every Republican state is fully on board with influencing, cheating, suppressing votes, throwing out ballots, literally just taking ballots from Democratic areas and throwing them in the trash. And there are less resources than ever before to stop them from doing that or hold them accountable, and more incentives for them to do it. So, Donald Trump's approval rating is still at 34%.
31.
31. There you go. 31.
He's trending towards Nixon territory. He's like in that zone. 25% is Nixon, and yet I still think he's going to get a good election here.
But here's you know what? I'll make my prediction. I'm going to make it even worse for myself. I'm going to make my prediction specific. Yeah. Okay, we're not going to have a veto-proof majority. Mm-hmm. We're not going to have enough seats in the House and Senate to send to convict on impeachment. Mm-hmm. And so, what does stopping Donald Trump look like when you just have a majority, a simple majority? He can veto anything he wants, and you can't remove anyone from their office. That's 2 more years of unadulterated Donald Trump.
It does give you some things. A House majority gives you investigation power. It gives you committee power. It gives you opportunity to, put people in front of a committee, ask tough questions, investigate them more thoroughly, and stop some of what he's doing because you can't give him the votes, right? You can't get him the policy votes.
So we had this before, though. We've already played this exact scenario in its first term, except now we're in the revenge tour, where the Supreme Court has gone even further, saying he's above the law and giving him the power of the purse. And the executive has never been more powerful and has never had more capabilities for illegally rewarding their supporters, protecting them from any negative consequences, and politically motivated attacks on the opposition. Mm-hmm. But we did this from 2018 to 2020, and we're just running the exact same playbook.
It's the exact same playbook. We're doing it again, and it may be even tougher than we think. We may not even get the majority at the end of the day. We may not even get it, and that's going to be even worse. But that doesn't change the scenario. I mean, the scenario is still we got to get rid of a presidency. And a system that is now being corrupted from the top down. And just getting back to Thomas here, what you're saying about Thomas is that if I'm hearing you correctly, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, what you're saying is that the state AGs should be acting right now against Clarence Thomas for the things that he has done over the last 20 years in accepting all these bribes and corruption.
Yeah, well, right? He says it's gifts. To me, when I look at case law of influence peddling schemes, and that's what it looks like. This is what it looks like when you have judges who should be recusing themselves. And the ethics laws and the corruption laws are very clear. Many states have much more clear anti-corruption laws, anti-influence peddling laws than the federal government. And those states can all be pursuing that. In Virginia, Thomas calls it he calls it gifts. I call it income that he's earning through illegal operations. And when I say that, I'm telling you that we can find case law that is identical, materially identical. It's the same circumstances, and it resulted in incarceration at the maximum and disbarment and removal from the bench at the minimum.
So you've seen it before. It's happened to other people. It's happened to judges. Why isn't it happening to Clarence Thomas? And this is a chart compiled of your article that you put out there, but it's basically saying that over $20 million of free gifts, $20 million. It's astonishing amount of money that no justice should ever be earning on the side, but from compromised people. And you include here documented and unreported gifts, $10 million worth, and then estimated non-documented gifts, about $11.8 million. And these are some of the places he got it from. I mean, we're talking, and he's on yachts, he's on these fancy trips all the time. Nothing has ever happened to him in the past, except we know, if I'm not mistaken, this other chart here, is that he reported this kind of stuff before in the past.
He did.
So he's aware that it's not right.
Yes. And I guess we should all ask ourselves, what's more likely, that Clarence Thomas receives undue enrichment, criminally liable enrichment in the tens of millions for his role as a Supreme Court justice and to impact how he votes in the Supreme Court and never recuses himself when his buddies and their financial interests appear before his court? Is it more likely that that's happening, or that Clarence Thomas is just so much fun that all these conservative billionaires want to hang out with him?
I don't think it's that much fun. And so when he first joined the courts, you say he did not, there was a law that said that you can't report large gifts as taxable income, right? And so he used to report that. And then he didn't. He stopped doing that in recent years, meaning he knows that he's hiding these things. And then what is this 2.2511 citations and keep specific 558.1 and 3.848 citations? What is that? Do you know what that is? Or maybe
I'm having trouble seeing it on my screen, but what I'll tell you also is that,
so we can zoom it for you.
Well, one of the important things for people to realize when we share this information, this is what's in the public record. I don't have the ability to call people for depositions. I don't have the ability to call for discovery. I can't demand that he hand over documents. I can't bring him in to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to wonder, this is what you're seeing is sufficient justification for an investigation.
Mm-hmm.
And what do we find if that's what we're seeing? I think that's really something people want to sit with. And your attorneys general, your county prosecutors, especially in Virginia, they have the ability. They have the authority. They can do it. And then if you email them about it, they're going to tell you about all the civil suits that they're doing. But we don't want civil suits. We want handcuffs. And if the Democrats are ready to start calling for that, they might have a higher approval rating than Donald Trump at some point.
That's a really good point, because this is kind of obvious. There are many states where state AGs are capable right now today. They're able to investigate and to lay charges. And then the democratic machines in each of those states are saying no. So what you're saying is don't only pressure the federal Democrats, but pressure the state Democrats to be doing stuff. That the pressure needs to be on all levels of government. Call your city councilor if you need to, but pressure everybody up and down the system to take action against these justices. So something is done. At least you can bring attention to the story, even if you don't end up, prosecuting them completely. You might be able to, at least the cases themselves might bring enough attention, and maybe they'll stop other people from being as corrupt down the line.
Well, that's one thing that's really important for people to realize is when you're waiting, like we did in the first Trump administration, people like Letitia James, who Letitia James is a courageous person. I'm very grateful for her work. But what a lot of these folks did was they waited for criminal prosecutions until Trump was no longer president. Or they played political gamesmanship. Like, hey, if some people say, if we should wait to pursue criminal charges or impeachment on SCOTUS justices until Donald Trump isn't appointing their replacements.
Right.
You don't fix a broken criminal justice system by playing political games with it. We need to show these people that we will aggressively pursue justice, always, relentlessly. Guess what? If Clarence Thomas starts getting investigated for fraud, I promise you, every one of those conservative justices is going to start taking a much more careful look about their conduct. And if one of them gets removed from the bench or sent to jail, whoever replaces them is going to be paying much more attention, because now they know that there's a disincentive, that we are watching and we want justice, and we will pursue it relentlessly. Even if we are told, if John Roberts wants to say that what he's doing isn't illegal, his court rules that everything he does is fine. Well, I got news for you. If it's county dog catchers or city council or something, we're going to keep looking for tools. And all these methods that I'm sharing with you, I didn't invent them. I got them all from the right wing, and it worked. That's how they got Roe v. Wade overturned. That's how in schools across America, they are putting they're teaching Christian curriculum. Well, that's not allowed. That's unconstitutional, right? They do it, and then they say, all right, let's bring the cases. They did it with abortion. Roe v. Wade had broad bipartisan support, and they waged a 50-year campaign to overturn it. They said, we're going to take the long shot cases. We're going to do what we think is right. And I believe in a woman's right to choose. But we can ethically apply those tactics. We can effectively apply the tactics. We can say that worked. Let's do it for good.
The alternative is watching our society continue to descend into chaos. I mean, we're not going to see, it's not going to make me feel like chaos, but it's going to be chaotic, because the more fascism encroaches in everybody's life and the more we get used to that kind of system. I've lived in a police state. We've seen it happen in other police states. the more dire the situation becomes. Because behind the scenes, they're stealing everything you have. They're stealing your rights. They're stealing your treasury. They're stealing absolutely everything you possess, your children's futures, your children. They'll just keep going after it. So what might seem impossible today, because you don't want to go up against, an angry president, or you don't want to go up against a judicial system that's going to be pushing back on you, if you can transport yourself to 10 years from now, and that's in that world, then you're in a much more dire situation than we are now.
Yeah, and you picked up on a point a few minutes ago that I think was really, really valuable, that we can turn our attention towards state level representatives, your county prosecutors, your DAs, your state house members. If you know the name of your state house member, you are in an elite tier. And in a lot of places, you can just you can email your state house representative or your city council member, and you can ask to get coffee, and you can talk their ear off about this stuff. And you are influencing them. And let me tell you, state house members, they can be convinced with logic very often. You're not going to get that from. I've sat down with senators. I've sat down with governors. They love my ideas, but they don't do it. And that's fine. That's okay. Fine. But the state house members, there's laws that the existentialist republic's written that are going to be brought to the floors of state houses in the next year. And it's just because, not just me, by the way, readers at the existentialist republic schedule these meetings and have the sit downs and are advocating for better public policy and taking power where we have it. Who, where you can.
Sorry, say that again. What's the last one?
Who, where you can. COUP.
Okay.
Mini coup. Like take power where you can get it. If you,
I love that.
Yeah, just go get on the school board and use that as a tool to fight fascism. Go get on the city council and use it. Go be the county dog catcher and let's figure out how we can fight fascism from that role.
I love all that so much, and I think what you've got here is a real a guideline for everybody. If they read your latest post about Clarence Thomas, there are real details of what you can do right now in terms of calling your state assembly member or your city council or whomever and say, these are the problems we're facing with the Supreme Court, and it's going to get worse. And this is why these particular things, we've got them here on the chart here, these are chargeable things that can be charged on Monday, as you put it on in your piece. The clock has not run out on them. They're serious, things that he's done. We can absolutely use, in this case, the Virginia Code to prosecute Thomas today. And, if you tell your state assembly person that, and hundreds more tell their state assembly persons that creates a movement, and that movement can ultimately change the whole trajectory of America. So, everyone should read The Existentialist Republic, because Chris is doing a fantastic job, and his readers are doing a fantastic job in showing you exactly the steps you can take to get some action done to save our democracy. Chris, tell us a little bit more about what people can do by following you.
Yeah, that's you mentioned up top about how the readers for the Existentialist Republic, like the activist members, effective activists. I have a lot of terms. I like making up terms, but they seem to be really enthusiastic in their support and engagement. And I think it's because from the very beginning, I'm not interested in being a leader. What I want to do is hand people tools. Mm-hmm. And everybody who reads the Existentialist Republic, everything's available for free. Even the books I write, like full-length 65,000 word books we have available for free. And I just want to hand people the tools so that they don't need me. They don't need a leader. They don't need a 501c3. They don't need to get a bank account and elect a board of directors. They can actually effectively influence the world towards justice. And I'll tell you, we spend so much time in the political world getting told by Democrats especially that, I just can't do anything about that. You're going to need to go to somebody else. I can't do that. And we don't need to accept that answer. And that's an empowering feeling, right? We want to. We want to feel like we can actually do something about.
Right, and that's what's missing. So what's missing in America right now is that sort of the fire that the people matter, and the people still matter. This is still, technically a democracy, and there is a lot of ways to impact change. And I hope people do this for the state assembly members. I also want to talk to you about tomorrow. Pam Bondi is testifying, just to get very granular here, in front of the Epstein Oversight Committee. It's a real test case to see what she is going to say. My guess is very little, But, you know, when people encounter what she's going to say, which is, you know, continued cover up of the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein, I'm quite sure she's not going to say anything negative about the president or anything like that, nor is she going to tell them that the president ordered the cover up. You know, there's going to be that sense of disappointment that you pointed to earlier. What can people do in that instance to react against what happens with Pam Bondi tomorrow?
I usually, my calls to action are focused on state and local, but occasionally I do go federal. And what I would say is get a hold of every member who is going to be asking her questions and tell them to mention that what she says is under oath, and they will be making sure that if she lies under oath, that she will face consequences for that. Criminal consequences. That is what will be pursued. We have a united front. That if she lies in front of Congress, if she misleads purposefully, she will be held to account. Call her a liar. Do it. That's what. Tell that to your representatives. Tell them what you want them to be saying. That's you don't have to repeat my words. Mm-hmm. There's this game that's played, especially by people in the legal profession, and most politicians are lawyers, and it's the I know better than you do. Don't tell. I have to handle it X, Y, or Z. No. Ted Lieu is a really good example of somebody who just calls it like it is. He called Donald Trump a pedophile on national TV, and every single representative, you can take that with your time too. Every single representative can start off, tell them, hey, the president's a pedophile and he's in the Epstein files, and I want every single Democrat to start their questioning with that phrase.
Mm-hmm. That'll be interesting. And certainly as they come out, there's so much that can be done tomorrow. And I hope people they'll be dismayed a little bit about Pam Bondi's testimony, but we know what she's going to say. We know we can also, as you point out, plan for reacting to that. And we should be vocal and very determined to say that we are going to get to the bottom of the truth. You're going to get to the truth, and we're going to do it now. We're going to do it when we take over, but it's going to happen. And at the end of the day, Pam Bondi's going to pay a price for what she did in covering up the Epstein files. Chris, tell people how they can find you. You're in tons of places. You've got so many great work. Where do they start? And if you want to become an activist in Chris's army, how do you become one?
The Existentialist Republic on Substack. If you just search the Existentialist, just Google the Existentialist Republic. Actually, forget Google. Use what's a better search engine?
Substack search.
Private. Yeah, Substack search too. But yeah, just the Existentialist Republic. We're the only one. It's a big network, and it's an army of leaders though. It's everybody's a general, and I hope you'll show up because it's all free and got a ton of booklets and books, and some of the booklets are like 20 pages, or sorry, like a 20-minute read. The Policies That Pass booklet talks about laws that you can pass at the city and state level that, might just improve the lives of residents and create more of a financial resilience against federal corruption. That's a really non-confrontational way right now to fight back. It's not just about putting, Donald Trump in jail. It's also about making sure that you don't have nobody's homeless or hungry in your community. Great way to fight fascism. And so the Existentialist Republic, if you just, Google that'll get your Substack. You could do that on Substack.
You also talk about the soft secessionism, I guess, is what you'd say. So tell people what that is a little bit. So that's interesting too.
Yeah. So I have academic work that I do. Previously, I'd done that in the criminal justice space, but now I'm doing that in the constitutional law space. And normally when you you work on something academically, you write it and then you share it with the public. Soft secession moved in the opposite direction. It really has been crafted, and sort of the peer review has been with the public and the Existentialist Republic readers. It started with me a while ago sharing some information from 2009. Heather Gerken published a paper on uncooperative federalism because I was just trying to research what are things that we can do to fight back. And so her paper on uncooperative federalism talked about how we don't have to comply with federal government activities that we disagree with. And that's an existing posture throughout U.S. history. From there, I've just started to create a structure that now is a 125-page working paper. Wow. So if you go to ssrn.com, you'll find my actual academic research. I can't submit it to the Yale Law Review for 2 months because they don't open up for another 2 months. I'm submitting it to the Yale Law Review because that's where Heather Gerken is the dean.
Yeah. Okay.
She's the dean of Yale Law. So since her paper was kind of the seed that created my work around soft secession, that's where I want to submit it. But you can view the full 125-page working paper. But what it covers is I've identified the 5 different postures of state activity towards the federal government. Tier 0 is cooperative federalism. That's just saying we get along, we agree, we work together. Tier 1 is uncooperative federalism. That was Heather Gerken's contribution to the field, or one of her contributions, because she's had a lot of them. And it says we don't have to help you. Tier 2 is soft secession. That's saying we don't need you. We're going to become, Washington State has a bigger economy than plenty of European countries that manage to have robust social safety nets. We can do that here. Your city can do that. Your city could have a healthcare plan, public option healthcare plan. You can get a lot more ambitious with it. And we're going to need to do that because they're trying to get rid of Social Security. So we need things like a state level alternative to Social Security. Even multiple states could get in on it. That is some soft secession. It's quiet quitting for government. Harm reduction. Tier 3 is oppositional federalism. Oppositional federalism. I came to soft secession because I said we need that harm reduction, and then I came to oppositional federalism because I said we got to hold these people accountable. We have to. And so that is using state criminal law to hold everyone accountable. Tom Homan took a $50,000 bribe. That happened in Texas. If Texas had Democratic leadership, people who valued law and order, he could just be charged for that in Texas. He took a bunch of money in exchange for influence.
It's a crime.
That's a crime. If it's a DUI or it's a bribe, it's a crime. That's tier 3, oppositional federalism. And then tier 4 is constitutional noncompliance. That is more comparable to, actively intervening and trying to stop things. Like if there's literal concentration camps and the governor says, well, they're going to have me in The Hague if I don't do something about it. So you send in, the National Guard or whomever. And also I'll say every single one of those, you don't just enter one tier. You don't have to do one and then do the other. Cannabis decriminalization is a really good example. So to understand, some states just said, we're not going to enforce drug laws because we don't agree with them. That's uncooperative federalism. Some states said, we're going to create an industry around it. And we're going to use it to generate revenue that funds other things. That's tier 3 and tier 2 conduct. And that doesn't mean the state isn't, every policy exists within those tiers. And even in a very confrontational posture, a state is largely in tier 0 because there is still cooperation on things that aren't, really, necessary to engage with and to keep, the wheels running wherever possible. But, some states said we're going to generate revenue with this. That's your tier 2, your soft secession that funds other things. They create resilience against economic issues. And then also saying that you're saying this is illegal, we're going to let it happen and we're going to permit it. And we're going to, do inspections. And that's where you get into that, even a little bit of tier 4 posture where you're like, come and stop us. Come and even though you're saying it's illegal, because there's 50 states,
This president will come at us, if you do all that stuff, but it's what we have to do. It is what we have to do.
If it's one person doing it, if it's one Letitia James, it's the whole government, the whole federal government versus her. But as soon as you have 2, and we saw with cannabis legalization especially, somebody had to do it first, and they did it. And then more states started doing it. And at a certain point, they can't effectively stop everybody. They don't have that many resources. And as soon as you have 2 people standing up to this administration with whatever their positions are of power, now the federal government is dividing their resources in 2. Now throw in a third in state. Like it really pulls their resources.
When you really think about where the economic power of America is, it's in blue states. It doesn't come from the red states. And so if you add all the blue states together, I don't know what the total economic output of those blue states would be, but more than Europe potentially. I don't know, a lot.
And the first economy, it'd be second to first biggest economy on earth, probably second for sure. Actually, definitely second now. A year and a half ago, arguably the largest economy on earth would be the blue state coalition.
which is why the crypto challenge that Trump is bringing from the right and from foreign sovereign funds and what they're doing through crypto is, and this is happening this week. The crypto house law that really needs to not be passed, but is going to be passed. But we'll talk about crypto next time because we're out of time. But and I do have a lot of ideas around that. But maybe there's something that we can work on together for state AGs and others to work on. Christopher Armitage, thank you so much for being here. Thank you at home for watching or wherever you are on your phones. We appreciate you all. We appreciate your activism. Say hi to the cats. Who's this one? How many do you have?
Princess Nandor. Yes, I have Nandor. 3 cats.
Chris is also a cat dude, by the way.
Cat dude.
Yeah, and proud of it. He's happy to be a cat dude. Chris, thanks so much. Always a pleasure to talk to you. People do love you for good reason because you're so passionate and excited about what you do. It comes through in everything you're doing. And good luck with the rest of it. And we'll see you again next time.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Sam. It was really a great chat. So take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.